Hello everyone, my name is Anamika Sharma and today we are going to discuss topic called human respiratory system. This is named as breathing and exchange of gases in your NCRT book of class 11th, okay? So we are going to discuss topic breathing and exchange of gases. Let's first discuss and get to know about what our topic, our what does this name actually means? This breathing and exchange of gases. Okay, what is breathing? Breathing is nothing but simply the process of taking the air in our body and expelling out the air. But are we just expelling out the air or specifically certain gases? What is breathing? Is simply the inhalation of atmospheric O2. So what our body does, we take in the oxygen from the atmosphere and we expel out the carbon dioxide which is produced by our cells. So the process of inhalation of the atmospheric oxygen, we call it inhalation, or we can also call it inspiration. Whereas the process of release of CO2 outside, the CO2 is produced by your cells. This is known as expiration, also known as exhalation. These four terms are quite important, and together, this cumulative work of inhalation of the atmospheric O2 from the atmosphere and release of the carbon dioxide that is produced by your cells outside into the environment is known as which is known as expiration, and this the cumulative uh, sum total of both these processes, which is inhalation and exhalation, is known as breathing. So, if I simply tell you what is breathing, breathing is nothing but just the inhalation, taking in the air, plus exhalation, that is releasing the carbon dioxide. Basically, what happens in the human body or any body which comprises of cells, this is basically all the living beings. There's a one fundamental process occurring in each and every cells of the body, and that is respiration. That is production of energy. Each and every cell independently make its own energy. How it produces energy? Whenever you digest food, whenever you have eaten some food. Let's say you have eaten some chapatis, you have eaten uh, any food, okay, biryani maybe. So your digestive system, what it does, it digests it. What happens in the digestion process? So the complex food particles, which are your carbs, which are your proteins, okay? The complex food particles, your proteins, your carbs and everything, they get converted into simpler molecules. Like we can say from the carbs are produced the glucose, because glucose, when bond together, they ultimately form the complex carbs, okay? Or glucose or other simple sugar forms, may be it fructose or maltose, but ultimately it's majorly glucose, and it could be glucose or it could be some amino acids, it could be fatty acids. All these monomeric forms they are absorbed in small intestine, and from small intestine via your blood it is taken to each and every cell, so that each and every cell could use these food products, could use these monomeric molecules. Okay, so via blood, all these are going to enter each and every cell. Each and every cell then independently performs the production of energy. How it happens? So let's say once the glucose has entered the cell, what happens inside the cell? Then occurs further metabolic reactions. Okay, then occurs further breakdown of the glucose inside the cell. Why? So that our cell can produce energy. There's the fundamental reactions occurring inside the cell. There are basically chains and chains of reactions occurring inside the cells. But if we cumulatively accumulate all that chain of reactions, just one fundamental reaction, we can say it forms C from glucose, and which is the molecular formula of glucose is C6H12 and O6. And in presence of oxygen, this reaction occurs. Okay, this oxygen is very important. This is the oxygen that we are inhaling actually. That's why we have to inhale all the time, because our cells need oxygen all the time. And that's why we have to inhale. That's why we have to inspire all the time. That's why we are breathing. So in presence of oxygen, this glucose gets broken down into water and carbon dioxide along with the heroic component, along with the heroic stuff, which is your energy. Energy is in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Because this is occurring in presence of oxygen, this type of respiration is also known as aerobic respiration, but that's your next lecture topic, okay? So in presence of oxygen, your glucose gets broken down into water and carbon dioxide and the ATP. This is the hero component. This is why all these reactions, all these chains of reactions occurs. This energy is the we need it to live. You can simply say live, right? Because if this reactions doesn't happen, we cannot be alive. Our cells don't work. Okay, so this is what's happening here. It's basically the oxidation of glucose in presence of oxygen. So we call it, what is this? This we call respiration. Okay, the process. So what is respiration? Respiration is utilization of oxygen in order to oxidize, in order to oxidize food substrates. Okay, it's simply, in simple words, we can say food substrate, but you know it's the monomeric forms, it's the digested food, it's your glucose. Okay, in order to produce, again we have used the in order, but in order to produce energy in the form of ATP. This ATP is then used for your daily activities. Okay, for daily activities, this ATP is used. This is the ATP is basically the energy currency of your cells. But you can you just take a look at this. One thing has produced here, which is carbon dioxide. How are we going to deal with this carbon dioxide? You know, this carbon dioxide is actually toxic for us. It's toxic. So it has to be taken out. It has to be released. And this carbon dioxide, it is needed all the time. And hence we breathe. And hence we breathe. We take in oxygen so that it reaches our cells and ultimately occurs your what? Oxidation of food. Ultimately occurs the oxidation of food. And this oxidation of food occurs, production of energy occurs, and also production of CO2 occurs. Now this I just told you that this is called respiration. Okay. But this carbon dioxide produced here is toxic. It's very toxic. If it gets accumulated in your cells, it's very toxic. It can lead to death. It has to be taken out. It has to be taken out, or you can say it has to be removed from cells. And hence we exhale. Okay. So what we did, we took in the oxygen, calling it inhalation. It went to our cells used the oxygen. What it did inside the cell, because of the digestion, our cells had the glucose, and that glucose underwent oxidation. It produced energy, but a byproduct also produced that was toxic, and it had to be removed from your body, and hence you exhaled. Now you have understood the concept of breathing. simply taking the air in and out, simply the inhalation and exhalation. What is respiration? Respiration is use of oxygen by your body cells uh, in order to oxidize the food substrates, in order to oxidize the glucose, so that your cells ultimately produce the ATP. During that process, during that procedure of formation of ATP, during this respiration, okay, during this respiration, carbon dioxide is produced, and this carbon dioxide is toxic and has to be released out. Okay, so let's understand how all other organisms, the starting from the in your animal kingdom, we start from the poriferans, right? We have poriferans, coelentrates, ctenophores, and many more. It reaches up to mammals. But they show a variation. They show variations in how they inhale and exhale. Okay, so the mechanism of your mechanism of breathing, it varies. This mechanism is going to vary from phylums to phylums, and as it goes above the hierarchy, it is going to vary. So it varies on two different factors, which is habitat, where the organism lives. Is it aquatic? Is it terrestrial? Another one is it depends on level of organization. Okay, so let's take it, let's understand how rest of the organisms are going to take. Like let's just imagine ourselves. How do we take? We have nostrils. Yes, can you see your nose? You can't see your nose, but you can touch your nose. There are two openings, right? A pair of nostrils we have. So via these nostrils, it enters our body. The air, the oxygen enters our body. It enters our lungs. In the lungs occurs the exchange of gases. Our body takes in the oxygen, and all those carbon dioxide that our cells has produced, it goes back to our lungs, and from the lungs it is this carbon dioxide is expelled out, right? But not all the organisms have this system of respiratory system of the lungs that having the nostrils. Not every organism has it. Does porifera has a nose? It doesn't. So how that happens in poriferans or like beings? For say we in case of porifera or in case of coelentrates, ctenophores, okay, or even flatworms. They are very simple. So what they do, they use their general body surface, okay? Via their general body surface, through diffusion, okay? Let's say this is the general body surface through the diffusion process, that is, the air enters through their general body surface. Generally, the top layers, the surface of the body. The oxygen is going to enter and the carbon dioxide is going to be expelled out along the concentration gradient. Because they don't have as many cells as we do. Most of the cells, they are in direct contact with their environment, and hence they're capable of taking in the oxygen and expelling out the carbon dioxide along their concentration gradients. Another example that we can take is that of earthworms. Earthworms belong to annelid group. An earthworm has shown cutaneous respiration. Now, what is cutaneous respiration? We are very much familiar with the respiration word now, which is simply the oxidation of the glucose or the food substrates so that we can produce energy and in presence of oxygen. Okay, so cutaneous respiration, what occurs in cutaneous respiration? Cutaneous, when the earthworm has special skin, okay, its cuticle is thin, sorry, it's thin, okay, its cuticle, the top layer is thin and moist and vascularized. Why it is thin? It is thin so that the diffusion becomes easier. Why it is moist? Because moist means its top layer is covered with water. Its top layer is rich in water, so that in the water your gases can get trapped. In the water the gases get dissolved and the diffusion process becomes faster and easier. Vascularized is that the skin of earthworm is rich in blood vessels, okay? The vessels are very rich in vessels so that the diffusion, the gases that has diffused inside enters the blood. That's the reason they have thin, moist, and vascularized skin. Another example that we can check off is arthropods. Arthropods have shown diverse ranges in case of their mechanisms of taking the air in and releasing out the carbon dioxide. Per se, we have crustaceans. Can you tell me a few names of organisms that belong to the class crustaceans? They are prawns. They are crabs. One character that is common to all is that they are aquatic, and hence they don't have gills, and they cannot respire by their skin also. So what do they have? They have gills, but book gills. They're not properly formed gills, but they are book gills. Okay. Another example of arthropods is arachnids, and certain example of arachnid is spider. Again, one common characteristics of the arachnids is that they are terrestrials, and hence they don't have gills because they can't respire by the skin because they have chitin on their body surface. It's impermeable to water. So how they do? They have book lungs because they are terrestrial. Another example and very important is your class insecta. They have a network of tubes. Via the tubes, it has an opening, and from that opening enters the gases and travels through a network of tubes, and ultimately occurs the exchange of gases so that the oxygen can be taken in and the carbon dioxide that their cells have produced can be taken out. Okay, so they have tracheal tubes. Another example that you can see is that of mollusks. We have read mollusks have a special type of gills that is ctenidium gills. But let's say from molluscans or from molluscans ultimately hemichordates and everything. Mollusk except your let's say echinoderms. Echinoderms have water vascular system. They don't have specially any special structure for respiration, but they have water vascular system. Via this they do their exchange of gases. Via this they perform their respiratory exchanges, their inhalation or exhalation type of processes. In mollusk, and except the echinoderms, okay, from mollusk till the Pisces, whoever lives in the aquatic forms, they have whoever lives in the aquatic world in your water, they have gills. Okay. So what are gills? Gills are basically in their body, there is presence of filamentous structures, they're long filamentous structures, there are long cylindrical thin openings via which the water enters. This water has dissolved oxygen in it, okay? Just wait a second. Dissolved oxygen in it. And along with water, the oxygen also enters the body. And inside the body, again, there is going to be an exchange of gases. The oxygen is going to enter their bloodstream. The carbon dioxide that is produced by the cell is going to be expelled out. And again, the water is going to be removed out of their body, but this time not via their gills, but via their mouth. Okay? Water has exit. Now, another example that you can see from, let's say, amphibians. Amphibians will do it after we have seen the case of reptiles, aves, and mammals. Now, these classes they show pulmonary respiration, that is via lungs. What are lungs? They are vascularized bag-like structures basically. You have seen lungs in many diagrams. They somewhat look like this. These are vascularized bags. They are specialized for the respiratory exchanges. We are going to talk about them more deeply in more great details after We are done with the covering the basics. So any kind of respiration that is occurring by your lungs, we call it pulmonary respiration. What do we call it? We call it pulmonary respiration. So if it is occurring via your skin, then we call it cutaneous respiration. Now I have left one class, that is amphibian. Why? Because amphibians, they are quite unique. They have dual nature of life. They have two. They have dual nature because they can live in water as well as they can live on lands as well. So when in case they're living inside the water, they have gills. Let's say the life forms, for example, in case of frog. Okay, in case of frog, their younger forms, that's tadpole, it has gills because it's aquatic, it lives in water. But after a while, this tadpole, undergoes metamorphosis, right? It loses its tail, it loses its gills, it develops limbs, then it develops lungs. So in its adult frog form, it uses lungs. One more thing that happens in case of frog is buccopharyngeal respiration, but I think that's a matter of another topic, because when you're gonna talk about particularly about frog, then you're gonna talk about it in a better way. But I can tell is that when buccopharyngeal respiration occurs, you can break down the word and you can understand that there is buccal cavity, and then there is pharyngeal, it is pharynx. Probably, not probably, but exactly, the buccal cavity and the pharynx are playing an important role in the respiratory exchanges, in the inhalation and exhalation process, because they fill up the air in their buccal and the pharynx cavity. You have seen they have the bloated neck regions of the frogs, and then they gulp in the air, and their surfaces, inner surfaces of these buccal and the pharynx, they are very rich in blood vessels. And once they have engulfed the air in, the respiratory exchanges, the exchange of the oxygen and the carbon dioxide occurs. And the carbon dioxide is expelled out. And this respiration is known as buccopharyngeal respiration. Okay. Now, we have completed the basically understanding what is breathing, what is respiration, what is and along the animal kingdom, how these things vary. I just told you that they depend on two things, that is their habitat and their level of organization. Okay, so now we can further move on with the human respiratory system. We will be doing that in your next class. Thank you.